so this is why I'm trying to review that axis over and over with you again, because in the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, you see the same pattern over and over again. You have the releasing hormones carrying signals from the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland, and then the pituitary gland releases that second wave of hormones, and then it reaches a target organ. And then the target organ secretes yet another different wave of hormones that end up in your bloodstream. Now, why is it so complicated, right? So why do they all secrete these three waves of hormones? Why does endocrinology have to be so complicated? Well, the other thing is that why not just keep it simple? Why not just make the hormones in your hypothalamus and secrete it directly to the circulation? Well, notice that the hypothalamus, compared to the rest of the brain, you only have a limited amount of tissue to work there. But there's another, like, it's not the only main function of these waves and waves of hormones, what we call a hormone cascade. But there's also something that's very important as well. It's what we call amplification. So amplification, so this is what we call a hormone cascade when we see this hypothalamic, pituitary, then target organ, the order of sequence of activation of these hormones. So here we have the hypothalamus. It's secreting those releasing hormones, right? And here we have I'm showing a very boxy cell, and here's a target organ. So when you have a releasing hormone, say you release, like in this very simplified example, you have the hypothalamus releasing this releasing hormone. But if it binds to all these cells that have receptors to this hypothalamic hormone, then these cells are going to release that second wave, and they're going to release their own sets of hormones. And these hormones, each of them can bind to receptors on target organs or target tissues. So what did you notice? Well, it's kind of like, well, pre-COVID, in the before times, remember how, like, say there was a big party, people would text their friends, and they would say, like, if they text 3 friends, and those friends text 3 more friends, and then your party blows up into a big block party or something like that. It's kind of like that. So what we have is exponential growth of the signal. So the hypothalamus is only to carry out the signal. If it didn't have the cascade, you would only have these 3 hormones in this very simplified example telling 3 cells. But if you have the amplifying and have these cells secreting their own hormones and releasing and targeting more cells, you're able to go from an initial signal and make it more exponentially stronger by releasing more and more hormones with every step. And the final here, the final wave of hormones, notice that there are more and more hormones being secreted at every level. So this is why these hormone cascades are very important. This amplification from this signal right here, but now you have all these final hormones being released by that target organ. Alright, so HPA axis, right? So we did have our top hat question, and so remember, this is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis classic question. If it shows up on, like, your licensing exams or MCAT, this is like this is like a common topic. So my mnemonic to review, you have the hypothalamus releasing corticotropin releasing hormone that targets the pituitary. The pituitary secretes ACTH in response, and then ACTH targets the adrenal cortex. That causes it to release cortisol. Now, it's not just cortisol, but this is definitely the hormone I want you to know from this axis. So again, my mnemonic is Hawaii cheerleaders perform amazing acrobatics. And cortisol, I actually updated this last year. So cortisol, I add chihu. I'm not going to chihu here because I'm at work and I'll probably make my office mates very upset. But yeah, that's my mnemonic for that. Okay, so the HPA axis, what do you have? That first wave of hormone, that releasing hormone, CRH, targeting the pituitary gland that releases ACTH. That targets the adrenal cortex. And the adrenal cortex, definitely I want you to know cortisol. It does release some androgens in response, and a tiny bit a small amount of aldosterone in response. So what we have here is that, just by that first wave, it amplifies with each step until you have this huge release of cortisol, androgens, and some aldosterone as well. So this is the HPA axis. You definitely have to know this whole cascade. Now, what we have here with the HPT axis, notice you have this. Instead of you get CRH, you have TRH. And then in the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis, instead of ACTH, you have TSH. And then you have a different set of hormones. And why? Because you have a different target organ. So instead of targeting the adrenal cortex in the HPT axis, you're targeting the thyroid gland, and you're secreting a different set of hormones. Now, in the gonadal axes, differs between males and females. In the, let's see, so what we have, the first step is the same. You have the gonadotropin releasing hormone, and that small n is important to kind of differentiate between growth hormone releasing hormone and gonadotropin releasing hormone. And then you have the set of two. This is why the gonadal one is a little special. You have FSH and LH. They're both important. Don't think one is more important than the other. And then in the female reproductive system, the target organ are the ovaries. And the male reproductive system, you have the testes. So the ovaries, they do produce testosterone, and they produce estrogens and progesterone as well. So these are and especially the estrogens and progesterone. Those are the primary sex hormones for females, and those are very important in the menstrual cycle. Whereas the testes, they produce androgens. Now, androgens is a general category of male sex hormones, so again, it's not just one single androgens. There are multiple types of androgens, but the testes, yeah, so what we have here, different target organs and different sets of hormones being secreted in response to this whole cascade. Now, what about growth hormone and prolactin? So they are anterior pituitary hormones, but they're a little different. There's a little twist. So in the previous three examples, the HPA axis, the HPT axis, and the HPG axis, we noticed that there were 3 steps. But, yeah, so here we have a typical one. So what we have here is wave 1, the releasing hormones, the tropic or stimulating hormones, including all of these, and then some other hormone, this third wave. But growth hormone and prolactin is a little different. You still have releasing hormones, but for growth hormone and prolactin, there is no third wave. That is your final wave of hormones. So growth hormone is directly secreted into your bloodstream, and that causes many different effects in the body. And prolactin, so there are systemic effects of prolactin. But again, what does lactin sound like? It sounds like lactation. It sounds like lactose, right? So it does target the mammary glands. And yes, men do have mammary glands. They're underdeveloped, but it can get very interesting.